Hey, this is I have to tell you that this is an unforgettable night that I had last night. So I'm in Houston. I got in yesterday, and it's been raining for like, I don't know, a century here, and the golf course was closed. So I was like, hey, do you guys mind if I walk it? And they're like, I'm like, I just want to walk. I'll stay on the cart pass. I just want to map the course. And they're like, nah, we really can't have anybody out there. And I was like, all right, that's cool. No big deal. So I'm driving to my hotel, and I get like halfway there, and there's this, I'm like, what am I going to do? Like I went to the mall and like walked around for an hour. Like, what am I going to do all day? So I found this like really, really run down hole in the wall bar, and they had a pool table, and I was like, all right, I'll just go play pool for a few hours. So I went in, and I met some really cool people, was playing pool, and I was like, you know what? I'm going back over there. I'm going to go map this course. I'm going to wait till it gets dark, and then I'm going to sneak in and map the course. So I wait till like 9, and I go over there, and the gate's closed. The entrance road gate is closed, and that's like, I'm not going to park my car on the highway. It's like right off the highway. So I'm like, okay, I pull into the next neighborhood, and I pull in, and I go down to the end of this road, and I look it up on my map, on MapQuest, and I see I'm right adjacent to the property. I mean, I'm like, maybe 200 yards from like the driving range. So I park my car, I get out, I leave my phone in my car because it's like completely dead. So I'm walking like through this backyard, and there's like dogs barking everywhere, and I'm like, oh God, I got to get through here. Well, it turns out the 100 or 200 yards I had to go was through like the nastiest like thorn bushes and creeks. I mean, the ground is freaking soaked. My shoes were soaked like 10 feet in. I'm like buttoning up all of my pockets on my coat and stuff to make sure I don't lose my wallet and everything I brought, like my notebooks and stuff. And so I finally get through this nasty stuff, and I'm on the driving range, and I'm like, man, this does not look like the driving range I saw yesterday. And it was like in some corner of the property, a little teaching area. And so I'm like, okay, where am I? So I find a road, I find a cart path, and I get over, I see the cart barn, and I'm like, all right, here's the golf course. And I'm there, and it's kind of lit up, so I'm a little scared that somebody might still be there, but I'm like, whatever. I just start walking away from the clubhouse, and figured I was either walking down 9 or 18. So I'm walking, I get like, maybe like, I don't know, 300 yards, and I'm like, man, this is unplayable. I mean, the course was soaked. I'm like, but whatever, I'll check it out. So I get to the tee box, and I look at the tee box, and it says 417 yards, par 4, hole number 9. And I look at my scorecard, and my scorecard says number 9 is like 532 or something. I'm like, no, what's going on? There are 2 courses at this place. Somehow I ended up on the wrong one. So now I walk around for like another hour looking for my golf course. Every hole I find is the wrong course. I don't want to get too close to the golf shop because I don't want to get caught. So anyway, I end up fruitlessly walking around this golf course for like 2 hours. Then I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm going home. So I find my way back to the point where I entered the course, and I'm cutting through all this stuff, and it's so bad. I mean, the only thing that didn't happen is I didn't lose a shoe in the mud. So I get through, I'm like at the edge, but I'm not where I was the last time. And there are like dogs barking everywhere. And I'm like, I'm going to get shot. I'm in Texas. I'm a trespasser in somebody's backyard. Somebody's going to freaking shoot me with a shotgun through this fence. So I'm like, forget it. I'm going back another way. I was like, I'll just exit the golf course and walk back into the neighborhood the way I drove in. So I go, and I find this like cut through. I found this like where there was like a bunch of electrical lines, so the grass was cut pretty short. So I'm walking through that, feet soaked. I come into this clearing, and there's like this huge drainage ditch, and I see some people, and they see me like at the exact same time, and they're like, oh shit. And I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like, hey, don't worry guys, I'm just kind of lost. And they're like just some high school kids, whatever they're doing, like smoking weed or something back in this field. And I'm like, hey, can you help me find my way out of here? And they're like, where are you going? And I'm like, I don't remember. And they're like, what the hell are you doing here? And so I'm like, all right, just get me out of this, get me into that neighborhood or whatever. And so they show me this little path. I take it, I come out, fine. I'm walking on the streets in this neighborhood, and I'm lost. I mean, this is a subdivision. Every name ends in gate. I remembered that the street I parked on ended in gate, but that didn't help at all. So I'm like walking around lost in this neighborhood, really lost, for like 30 minutes. And I see a kid on a bike, he looked like he was like 12 or 13. I'm like, hey, kid. And he's like, shit. And I'm like, don't worry, dude. I'm just lost in this neighborhood, and I need help getting out of here. Can you help me? And he's like, yeah, I mean, I guess. And I'm like, look, my car's parked on, I think it's Wayne's Gate. And he's like, Wayne's Gate? I've never heard of it. And I'm like, yeah, it's a dead end. It's at the very end of some corner of the property by the golf course. And he's like, oh, the golf course is that way. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I just start jogging. I'm like, I'm not going to walk this. I'm going to jog it. So I'm jogging. I get to, I've gone maybe a mile. And the kid comes back on the bike. And he's like, hey, the golf course isn't that way. It's the other way. I'm like, oh, man. So I go back the other way. I'm going back the other way, and I'm like, all right. And this kid's with me. He's like, here, let me call my girlfriend. She lives in this neighborhood. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, don't you have homework? It's like midnight or something. And I'm like, don't you have, homework to do? And he's like, I don't do homework. And I'm like, well, maybe you should think about it. But anyway, I don't know why I'm giving this kid a lecture. He's trying to help me find my car. So he calls his girlfriend. I'm like, hey, tell your girlfriend to Google map us. Tell her what streets we're on. Tell her where the golf course is. Have her see where we are relative to that corner of the property, and have her direct us toward my car. And he's like, okay. And then he's telling her this, and she just disappears. And he's like, oh, I don't know. She must have gone to get her computer or something. So she comes back finally, 5 minutes later. We're walking in circles, looking for Wayne's Gate, when every road is gate something. And we finally get her back on the phone, and she's like, I can't find it. And I'm like, okay. Can she tell us where the golf course is relative to us? And he's like, yeah, it's by Anderson. And I'm like, okay, so let's go that way. So we go to Anderson, which is like a school, a kids' middle school or something. So we go to Anderson, we get to the street, and I'm like, this looks familiar. And I'm like, I think this is the road I pulled down. So finally, we walk down this road. I'm like, hey, why don't you go around that block, look for a silver Volkswagen. I'm going to go down this road. I'm honking my horn on my keychain or whatever, and then I see my car, and I'm like, oh, finally. So I see my car. The kid comes back around on the bike. I'm like, dude, give me your PayPal address as soon as I have some money, which I have no idea when it's going to be. I'm sending you a check or, something. And he's like, cool, man. Thanks, dude. And I'm like, now go do some homework. And he's like, I'm going to my girlfriend's. I'm like, just whatever. Good luck, and give me your email address. So I've got this kid's email address somewhere in my notebook, I'm sure. So then last night, after this, his name was Nick Culpepper. Good kid, but doesn't do his homework. So I'm like, all right, now I got to go back to this bar and tell these guys what just happened. And it's like 12:30 or something. So I go there, and I walk in, and they're like, hey, you came back, the golfer. And I'm like, yeah, hey, shit. And I'm soaked. My rain jacket's covered in dirt and twigs and stuff. And the guy's and my shoes are just completely sopping. I take my shoe off and make footprints on the floor, and they're all like, your feet are wet. I'm like, yeah, my feet are wet. And they're like, so what'd you do? And I'm like, I went and I cut through this backyard. And they're like, you went through a creek? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, and you didn't get fire ants all over you and water moccasins? And I'm like, fire ants and water moccasins? And the guy's dead serious. He's like, dude, you're one lucky son of a bitch. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. I mean, water moccasin, right now, they're everywhere. And fire ants will just sit there and float on the water. And as soon as you get in the water, they'll attack you. He's like, we don't go in creeks this time of year. I'm like, all right. Okay, so let's shoot a game of pool, and I'm going home. So that's how it ended. I escaped with my life. No fire ant bites. I shot a game of pool. I went home. This morning when I woke up, my shoes were completely soaked, covered in mud, and my rain gear is kind of all dirty and wet. But it's on the windowsill at the hotel. It should be ready for tomorrow. Right now I'm going to the course to actually, hopefully, map it out. And that's the Unforgettable Night in Houston on March 20th or so, 2012. Adios.